Hello, this is Christian Idealism, and today we are going to be going into why universal consciousness has awareness. This is, of course, brought to you by Cal Allender. So first, we need to define our terms. So once again, consciousness proper is mental activity is conscious if and only if there is something, anything it is like to have such mental activity in and of itself. And then we have on top of that, which would be self-reflexive consciousness or awareness, which would be the conscious knowledge of the experience, which comes in addition to the experience itself. And so idealist philosophers like Bernardo Kastrup hold the view that we are all in universal consciousness, but that this universal consciousness lacks awareness or lacks self-reflexive consciousness. I actually disagree and think that there are good reasons to think that this consciousness we are all in has awareness of its own and can act through its own free will or volition. So now, what are some of the advantages of universal self-aware consciousness? Well, if universal consciousness doesn't have awareness, then there is no reason for embodied moral agents to exist. While it's true that within universal consciousness, awareness is simply an additional quality of consciousness proper, that's because we are not omniscient and our knowledge needs to grow, whereas universal consciousness would already have all the knowledge it needs. And so now let's divide this into two hypotheses. Let universal consciousness lacking self-awareness be UC, and let universal consciousness having self-awareness be UCA. So now what are the predictions made through these models? Well, let's go over them. So, universal consciousness with awareness would predict embodied moral agents, free will, fine-tuning of life, objective moral values, discoverability of the universe, self-reflexive consciousness, and miracles. Whereas universal consciousness without awareness would not predict moral agents, it would not predict free will, it wouldn't predict fine-tuning, it would not predict objective moral values, it would not predict the discoverability of the universe, it would not predict self-reflexive consciousness, and you wouldn't have any miracles. Well, if we look at reality, we can see why this is wrong. So, reality does tell us that there is embodied moral agents, that free will does exist, that the universe is fine-tuned, that objective morality exists, that we can discover the universe, that self-reflexive consciousness exists, and that miracles happen or have happened in the past. So, we also need to take into account the cumulative case with natural theology. So, while one considers these two models, we need to take into account natural theology. While it's true that Kastrup's model can explain more than physicalism, it fails when actually predicting the emergence of life. And so under Kastrup's model, there's no reason for the emergence of self-reflexive consciousness in the universe. So that if all is just pure experience, then why would there ever need to be knowledge of this experience? So while Kastrup's model can certainly explain consciousness, and it can explain the emergence of human beings, and it actually could technically explain all the things I mentioned, the problem is that it doesn't make those predictions. Since if universal consciousness is impersonal, then it wouldn't have reasons to create self-aware beings. And so, what is the actual nature of awareness? Well, while it's true that awareness or knowledge of experience is emergent, this doesn't imply that all of awareness is emergent in the same linear way. So God's awareness would be emergent in the same way, but due to him being timeless, there would be no linear evolution of time. God's time would be going from 1 to 1 to 1 forever, never reaching number 2 from his perspective. This is of course why God is eternal. And so while emergence does require some sort of time, it doesn't require linear time. And with God's knowledge of everything, he is already aware of all things. And so, summary of this so far, just so we can kind of wrap up. So, given the evidence, it is more likely that universal consciousness has its own awareness rather than lacking awareness. So number one, universal consciousness with awareness can explain the existence of human beings and why nature is more goal-oriented rather than random, as well as making those predictions. Universal consciousness lacking awareness wouldn't be goal-oriented toward anything, since as if all is just experience without any knowledge of those experiences, then there's no free will in nature, and you don't get the same sort of predictability as you do if you accept that the universal consciousness does have awareness. So while universal consciousness without awareness can certainly explain all these difficulties, it does not predict these things, which is why when we take into account natural theology and the cumulative case for God, it's more likely than not that universal consciousness would have its own awareness. And so that will be my video. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.